So what's really going on with Christians in America today? Many have lost their faith and left the church altogether, while others have signed on to a new, very radical form of Christianity. I'm David Tomsic, and you're watching Loud and Clear. I'm glad you can join me for this, our inaugural episode. Please watch the video to the end. If you enjoy it, subscribe to our channel. And while you're at it, please like and share it as well. American Christians, there's some problems here. And I'm going to talk about a few of them today because ultimately, we're starting to see more and more people not physically going after Christians, although many Christians truly believe that. We're seeing people ignoring them, starting to realize that they're hypocrites, starting to believe that they are a problem. And sadly, they are in many instances. Now, back in the 1860s, America tried to get into this holy Reformation. There was a National Reform Association here that tried to make America a Christian nation by legislation, have basically Christian principles and values put into the Constitution. It did not pass, thank God. That was not a very good idea because, again, anytime mankind gets involved with making rules and dominating over somebody else, there is issues. We've seen this throughout history. It's called oppression. Now, it didn't die there, though. For years, there have been people trying to bring sort of this Old Testament-style government to the United States. The modern political movement, the Christian right, was pretty much founded in the early 1970s by a guy named Reverend Jerry Falwell. Now, this guy created eventually the moral majority. It's a contradiction in terms because, again, there's some form of identification that you are better than somebody else because you think you're moral. I don't know that that really works again in the 1970s or in the year 2025. Again, forcing your values onto somebody else does not work. That's called oppression and tyranny. We're seeing that now from the church in many ways. But it really started even farther back to the 1940s, white fundamentalism. These were pretty much white Anglo-Saxon Protestants trying to, once again, bring back a way of life that never existed, trying to make America white again and Christian again. It didn't work, but the foundation was set, my friends. The foundation was set. So we got to look at where this led further. So once you set the foundation, you come up with a guy named Ronald Reagan, very conservative, quasi-Christian. His wife basically ran the White House the last 5 years of his presidency with a Ouija board. But I digress there. You see the contradictions here. But people, mostly white, and I'm not saying others didn't vote for him, but mostly white people supported Ronald Reagan because he was going to fix America. He was going to make everybody prosperous. He was going to bring Christian values and principles to the country. And he was somehow going to make it all right. Well, he seemingly did okay. But once you look back, you realize that he did a lot of negative things too. He went after the New Deal. He was the first Republican to actually physically go after Roosevelt's New Deal. He wanted to eliminate unions. He fired the air traffic controllers. Now, once again, there's debate over that. But keep in mind, whatever the debate is, the ultimate goal was to crack unions in general, was to break unions in part. For what? Because Reagan was a guy really for business. Yeah, he was for big business. He was for America first, big business. He's the one that single-handedly took down the Berlin Wall. Well, that's not totally true. That's, again, hyped history. People will stick by that story. There was a lot of things that happened, and Reagan might have been the last small nail that went into the coffin, but the Soviet Union was doomed well before Ronald Reagan spoke any of his fancy words. And remember, Reagan was an actor. So if you think about it, Ronald Reagan is the very foundation that today's Christian nationalist movement is built upon. So I have some history here as well. I was a Democrat growing up, grew up in a Democratic town with a Democratic family. And we all believed in the New Deal. We didn't actually speak about it, but we all believed in better wages and health care. We believed in workers have to be protected. The middle class has to be protected. But somewhere along the line, the Democratic Party left the middle class, deserted them altogether. and it became more and more about very far left-leaning ideals. I have no problem with protecting those people that are on the far fringe of the left. I have no problem with that. People don't like me saying that. My complaint is that you can't leave your base and put all of your time into that issue or those issues. Now, before I move forward, let's go back a little bit. Let's keep in mind that there always has been a very radical right-wing component to America. Radicalized Christians. There always has been. You didn't see a lot of them until the 70s. And of course, then they went back to sleep for a while until Reagan came, and that was the base that was going to be used to build this Christian right coalition. Now, I truly believe that, this Seven Hills mandate, controlling the seven hills of society, education and government and, go down the list. This is something they really, really want and believe should happen. Now, I want to say this. Your church, your pastor, your friends may not say that they are part of this, but if they agree with any of these tenets, they are. Guilt by association is true here. You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. People that believe that Christianity should rule America, they're dangerous people. And I say that because they will step over the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to get what they want. Even though many of them have said that God built this country and used the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to make us this godly nation. And at the same time now, they want to eliminate the Constitution, eliminate our way of government to bring on somebody who wants to be a king. Yes, I fast forwarded that far. So that leads me to this. My second point I want to make is that the Christian right today is really based on what I call law and judgment philosophy. You listen to a lot of people, they really use a lot of Old Testament scriptures to back up what they say. And they do that because, see, in the Old Testament, the Jews, Israel, was run by a king. They had a king all the time that God usually appointed. And when they didn't let God appoint it, everything went wrong for them. There's history there. But keep in mind, this was 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. They use this because it makes people believe that God's involved and he wants a king and he wants his way to be our way. It's a roundabout way of saying that we're going to make sure you follow what God says because we're going to make laws that force you to do it. Not on my watch. So this movement, this Christian nationalist conservative movement that you see today, isn't Christianity. It's Christians wanting to take charge, take power, take authority, using the Bible and scriptures they can find that back them up as leverage against the rest of the United States, as leverage to use against the American population and, of course, our way of life, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. So what did they do? This was something that was brewing for a long time. So basically, if you go back in the 1860s, they tried to make the United States a Christian state. In the 1940s, they tried to have white fundamentalism take charge of America. In the 1970s, Jerry Falwell tried to create this moral majority and force people to believe what he believed. You also had Pat Robertson come out and do the same thing. Then you had, basically, in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan, who created this new white nationalist state. Yeah, I say white. I do, because let's keep in mind, he really was a favorite of white people. White rich people loved him as well. He was the great conservative leader. He set the foundation for what you now see in the White House. Ronald Reagan was not the type of person that could galvanize a nation to go to war against itself. But someone was waiting in the wings, and that someone was Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is not the sickness or the disease. He's the symptom of it. But he was the guy that was waiting in the wings that nobody knew about that would eventually galvanize this right-wing, radicalized Christian nation. MAGA, Make America Great Again. Not everyone in MAGA is a Christian, but I bet you there's a lot of them. I bet you a vast majority of them are. The Make America Great nostalgic movement. Of course, this is just words. He never knew what that meant. And again, he doesn't even know what it means to make America great. Nobody does, because no matter where you look back in history, somebody was getting screwed. Nobody had it great. It wasn't great in the 60s if you were black, or in the 50s if you were black, or in the 40s if you were black. It wasn't great for the Japanese we interred during World War II. There's a lot of things you go down the list today. If you're an immigrant, it's really a tough time to be around. There's no time like the present. You have to start here. You have to make it right here. But we want to go back. Unfortunately, if you go back, you find a lot of issues that no one ever solved, a lot of problems that no one ever addressed. We tried, and the Democrats did try. Civil Rights Act, you name it, they did try. But again, they left many of these people standing in the cold. So I condemn the Democrats for that. If you're a Democrat and watching, call your congressman or your senator, your local people. Get involved with conversations in your community that help people understand that Democrats have to be for the middle class. And of course, other people who are on the fringe or marginalized. But they have to stay with their base first. They lost that base. But maybe their base, the Democratic base, will come back to the party, realizing that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I was that Ronald Reagan guy back in the 80s. I converted to being a Republican. I watched Fox News all the time, fair and balanced. Of course, that's all a joke, and that was all a lie. Again, they're part of that platform. They're part of that foundation. They're part of the working pieces that helps guys like Donald Trump stay in power, keep power, get his narrative across, promote it as great. So what do? Well, we realize that Donald Trump today is a guy that really isn't a Christian that I know of. Now, he has not said he was. He has not confessed that he's a Christian. I don't think he has. But he has said things that tells you who he isn't, because he said he never had anything to repent for. Now, we know that's a lie, and we know who this guy really is, which is the other conflict with American Christians. They don't want to realize who this guy really is. They go back to the Old Testament and use people like Cyrus and King David and all these people that were pretty flawed people. And they want to use that as an example of, well, God allows these corrupt people to rule. But we have Jesus now, right? I mean, that Old Testament's done. Now, Jesus has standards. Christians want to push their standards on everybody except the standards that count. How about standing for a standard that has your president being a righteous guy, a just guy, a fair guy, without a criminal record, without being a womanizer, without being a racist, without being any of the things he really is? They refuse to talk about that. They push that back and go back to the Old Testament. Well, the Old Testament's not going to save him. His polling numbers are a disaster. At least 54% of the people are against him. It could be as high as 58% of the people in his country disapprove of him. But he's God's man. But what has he done that was godly? I can't think of anything. You see, Christians go and they like this, and this is where their legalistic tendencies show. Now, before I get there, just remember, there are very few children, very few young adults going to churches today. They will tell you the reason they don't go to church is because of the pastor, many in the congregation, and of course, the church's viewpoint on everything that has to do with culture today. The hatred they possess towards these people that are on the fringes of society. The hatred they show towards immigration, towards LGBTQ+, towards transvestite communities. This is no secret. So young people who grow up in this society now, they see these people as humans. People in churches many times don't. So Donald Trump really was the guy that could galvanize people by taking all the things they hate. And Christians played a massive part in this and put it into one platform. We're going to make sure gay people can't marry. We're going to make sure transvestites can't show themselves in public. We're going to make sure that every illegal immigrant is arrested and thrown out of the country. Go down the list. Now, for me, you look back at what Jesus said. What'd you do for the least of these? See, the words of Jesus really are the foundation to what we believe from the Bible. So Jesus is the foundation of the church, and the words Jesus spoke are literally gospel. And when he tells people to make sure you welcome the immigrant, help the poor and needy, he meant that. That was the key. See, Christians use all the other scriptures blaming everybody else for sin. But their sin is saying that, well, we're not going to help people in need through the government. We're not going to show mercy to immigrants through the government. But you see, they don't show mercy to the immigrants without the government. They're not helping the needy without the government. Their small little church programs really don't even break the ice when it comes to poverty in this country. But keep in mind, that serves a very small segment of the need. The U.S. government is the only way you can help people across this nation. And the U.S. government isn't just an entity. The U.S. government is us. So what they want to tell Jesus when they meet him, and I'm talking about Christians, they want to say, well, we were for everything you said, except we didn't believe the government should do any of it. So we didn't want to support anybody. In fact, I got a message on Facebook from a woman I've known for years. An older woman goes to a church that I have attended. And she said she's not going to support anything the Democrats do, and she wants to make sure that no immigrant gets health care. Now, she was implying that immigrants are getting health care. Keep in mind, according to the law, they cannot get Medicaid or Medicare. Maybe under special circumstances, I kind of don't know that, but I know the law states that basically you have to be a U.S. citizen to get health care. As far as I know, these people have not been declared U.S. citizens. But what she was really referring to, and she didn't know, because again, people are not bright, she was referring to when they go to the hospital, they get free health care. So you're going to go up and you're going to tell Jesus, Christian, that, well, we're not paying for that. They go to the hospital, they shouldn't get free health care. Their child's dying, but guess what? That's not what the government's supposed to do. We stop that right now. We should stop that right now. I don't know what Jesus would say. I get the feeling he would say, get thee behind me, because once again, the U.S. government is not a spiritual entity. The U.S. government is a bureaucracy. We don't like bureaucracies, right? But you kind of need them. You can't get around the bureaucracy that is the U.S. federal government. You can't do it. Of course, Donald Trump's trying to by firing everybody. But believe me, you do need those people. If you don't think you need them, fine. You believe what you want to believe. I'd rather know that the weather forecasting we get from NOAA is accurate and done by scientists, and there's plenty of them and enough of them to do their job. I'd rather make sure that the national parks have more than enough people staffing them. I want to make sure that there's a lot of people looking out for our environment. But Donald Trump wants to destroy all that. And so do Christians. So you're going to go in front of Jesus and explain this, that that's the government, that's not us. See, God is not a person of country, of borders. As a Christian, you live in the United States, you might want secure borders, you want to do all this stuff. But there's a very fine line there, very fine line. That fine line is those people coming in, whether you like it or not, whether the United States government or the laws say they're illegal to you, they're somebody in the likeness of God. They are somebody that Jesus said, reach out to, make welcome. People in the streets, people on the fringe of society, whatever they are, whoever they are, that's where he was. You see, he was woke. And right-wing Republicans hate that. Right-wing Christians really hate it. And even some that aren't right-wing hate it. But I will tell you, if Jesus ran on a political platform today, and of course he never would, he probably would be considered woke. He probably would be considered liberal. Now, I know everybody tries to debunk that. Well, Jesus said, oh, they just want to come for food. That's right. People did want to come for food because probably they needed it. I'm not saying there were a lot of rich people in the Middle East at that time. Of course, they were occupied by Rome. What could they really do unless you were one of the elites? Sadducees, the Pharisees, whoever. For most people, were poor. So yeah, they would follow him for healing, for food, if he was performing another miracle to feed the masses. But they came to him. He didn't say, get out. They came to him. So Christianity has a problem, and its problem are Christians. The judgment sector of the Christian world, the law and order, which they talk about a lot, means nothing in the big scheme of things. Because, again, they want retribution. People that have offended them, they want out. They want put in jail. If you disagree with me, you should be in jail. Donald Trump believes this. And of course, they follow their leader because they want people to be put in jail. They want people to be outcast, to be thrown out of the country. Believe me, you can't hide behind America. Christians hide behind America. They hide behind it. This is what we believe. If you come in here illegally, we want you out because this is what we believe as Americans. Well, you can believe that as an American, but as a Christian, it's 180. It's the opposite. Jesus didn't want you to be a politician or be political. That's another story. That's where it all went awry. Yes, you vote and you speak your voice. But when you raise a hand against those that Jesus said to protect, you got an issue. And don't use the federal government as your excuse. That's not allowed. We shouldn't allow that. We're the people. We can allow what we want. And if they want to send people back by the thousands and tens of thousands, and you put your hand out and help them, you agree with them, you support that, believe me, I believe you're going to have some conversation with Jesus. You're going to have to explain where that is in Scripture. He's going to ask you, and I'm going to warn you here, he's going to ask you this question. He's going to say, what did I tell you? What are you going to say? Well, it has nothing to do with it. That's the law. He says, I am the law. Jesus was the law. He was the fulfillment of it. So if you think you're going to get away with agreeing with hating gay people, hating transgender people of any kind, illegal immigrants or any immigrant, or anybody that disagrees with you, you're not going to get away with it. The words of Jesus are very specific. You can point at everybody else, which you do. Pastors do it all the time from their pulpits. So when people ask me what's wrong with the Christians in the Christian church today, this is what I tell them. They got stuck in right-wing fundamentalism. And so many people are stuck there, even people who aren't in fundamentalist churches. Even if you're not considering yourself MAGA, even if you don't go to an evangelical church, and even if you go to an evangelical church that doesn't preach that or show that, many of their beliefs are still based on hatred, on their belief that Christianity should right now rule the world, and everybody's against them. And so we either take over the world or let Jesus come right now. There's no gray areas. Unfortunately, in life, there are. Unfortunately, in life, you have immigration laws that are screwed up because no one ever fixed them. We're blaming the immigrant who wants to come here to work to get a better life, like our forefathers did. But we want to persecute them. They're brown. They don't speak English. They came in, and they're getting all these benefits, and they're stealing all of our money, and they're eating the cats and dogs. All this stuff Donald Trump has created in a narrative to make sure we put ourselves at war with all of them. That was never the Christian theme. It was never the theme of Jesus. Generally speaking, in America, in this world, most people are just trying to find their way. Not everybody's a demon. Not everybody's evil. Like Democrats, for instance, people tell me directly that Democrats are demons. They're demonic. Every one of them. Now you see where this has gone. So I'm going to tell you today, so if you're in that very far right world, I can only say that, like me, I pulled myself out of it. That's another whole story that I'm not going to tell. I realize, without deconstructing my faith, unfortunately in America, we've allowed those people with the most hate towards blacks and immigrants, gay people, transgender people, whatever. We've allowed them to take control of our churches and our political parties. Although the Democrats are still in disarray, in my opinion, have issues, and I've mentioned those, the Republicans have solidified under a very radical right-wing form of Nazism. And unfortunately, Christians are for that because Christians want the strong man. I did a few videos on that. I'll link those in the description box. Christians want the strong man. They want the strong king from the Old Testament that'll cut your head off if you disobey, that'll put things right, that'll fix it all. Donald Trump's in no position to fix anything. His presidency is in dire straits as people form against him, as the 2028 elections draw near. And if the Republicans lose a lot of those seats they had in the Senate and the House during those elections, Donald Trump will go deeper into the tank. He has driven a wedge in the middle of America, in the heart of America. He has divided this country more than any person or thing or situation has since the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. And Christians are okay with that. So yeah, there's a problem with Christians, a big problem. What you do to the least of these, you have done unto me. So love your neighbor as yourself. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share our video. and stay tuned for the next episode of Loud and Clear. See you later.